Hi, this is Laura Wiley, and I am with Paul Heirendt, and we are actually chilling out right now in Venture Cafe. We're taking our own little breakaway moment to have a little one-on-one and talk about all the great things that are going on in our community. And Paul, you have such an amazing presence and involvement and have so much to share with the community. And we talk about so many things and opportunities. Where would someone even get started?
You probably have to start the way I started. So
Okay.
I was moved to St. Louis by a company that was based here.
Okay.
And my job was everywhere except St. Louis. So
Okay.
I spent the first 20 years in St. Louis not really being in St. Louis that much or building a network. When I decided to go out on my own and start a business, then I had to connect with the community. And I found that it was really hard unless you actually get out and go and visit people and go to activities. And it was that getting myself out and connecting with whatever topic it was. It didn't even have to be, I go to meetings more for the people that are going to be at the meeting than the topic of the meeting necessarily. So that's really been how I started networking, and then saw a need for helping people really get businesses started and understanding what it takes to not only take an idea to a business, but what it really means to build that business. So that's why I got involved in the startup community. I was involved before the internet bubble burst, and it was a pretty vibrant community here. And then when the bubble burst, everybody kind of disappeared. And it started to come back a little bit, and then 9/11 happened, and everybody disappeared again. So only about 5 years ago, really, I think some of the downtown stuff that started happening, and the resurgence of downtown, when Jim Brasunas and Francis Chemelaar started TEC Tech, which ultimately morphed into I-10. That's when people started connecting again, and we started having events where people would come out. And that's really been the catalyst, I think, the seed of the catalyst for the whole St. Louis startup scene.
Wow, and that's 5 years ago, right? So, sometimes things are kind of slower to adapt. What do you think is now the pace at which St. Louis is growing and taking on and trying to take ownership and really become more involved? Instead of being more what you were doing, right? But identifying
scale.
Really scale it, right?
Yeah, and that's been several things. T-Rex was a big thing because it brought a lot of young entrepreneurs in one place.
One place, right?
And it's that you only have a movement when there's critical mass.
Exactly.
And building that critical mass of bringing people together. Before that, we'd have scattered meetings, and there'd be scattered interest, and companies were kind of spread all over the place.
Scattered.
There were pockets, like the Cortec district. For biotech and some tech. So I had a company, still have a company, Trade Harbor, that was in the CET, and the CET had events, and there was some involvement, but it wasn't much broader than really biotech or the Center West End.
Little pulses of activity, right?
But it's when we started having broader activities, and now with Venture Cafe every Thursday. Every Thursday there's something happening.
Thursday.
And meetup. There's lots of meetup groups. Some of them are hyper specialized, and I had a few specialized. I've now rolled them back into a group that's more generalized called Hackers and Founders.
I did a few of those as well, right?
And that's been helpful too, because people with special interests, but they also discover groups that are across that interest. And I think the key to an ecosystem, it's not an ecosystem if all fish are small. There's the Krebs cycle in science, Small fish are eaten by big fish, and the big fish die, and they become food for the mamas for the new babies, There's that cycle. So it's getting cross-pollination is really when an ecosystem starts to flourish, but it doesn't happen overnight.
It doesn't happen
It takes time to build it, and it's built through relationships.
Exactly.
As people start to know one another, then they start to get comfortable, and then they tell two friends, and so on. It's basic marketing 101. Tell two friends, they tell two friends, and it grows.
And I think too much of your success, and I think our shared success, is about relationships, that you form today that you wouldn't have otherwise, that you formed last week, last month, last year, 10, 20 years ago, And I think you would be a testament to say, you just don't know, And those collisions could come in and out. We may wear different hats at different days and be under different umbrellas, but having those, go back to what Travis says, those serendipitous collisions that building those relationships and strengthening those over time is critical to how we all evolve and change. And then the other thing, like you said, is really identifying those opportunities and being those agents who are connecting with others, building those relationships. So, you know
If you don't get outside your comfort zone, you don't meet anybody new.
Right. If you stay in your industry and you stay in your own little bubble, like you said, during those moments of recession or, tragedy, it's not the time to recede. There is some fear, or people feel very risk adverse, but we need to. The more that we come together, we can get through those times. And just like a time right now, St. Louis is starting to really flourish, right? And we feel like we're just scratching the surface.
And I think we're on the verge of something that's now becoming more regional collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, a couple of years ago, I was invited out to St. Charles because a friend of mine who's a banker said, "I know you're Don Quixote, what's the next windmill?" Right? And I said, people in downtown that are part of the tech scene in downtown don't really know what's going on in Midtown. The people in Midtown don't have a clue what's happening in Ferguson or down in Fenton, right?
Right, exactly.
Or across in St. Charles.
And
So he
you're
said,
talking 20 minutes.
Right.
You're not talking a great distance.
no, and not even 20. So he said, okay, I'll set up a lunch. So it was Randy Schilling, who's a very successful entrepreneur, and he was one of the examples. I said, there's guys starting businesses in downtown St. Louis that don't know Randy's story.
Sure.
He started a tech business out of his own pocket and had a very nice exit. And now he started another business and it's going to have a very nice exit. He's creating a new incubator called OPO Startups in downtown St. Charles. A lot of people in St. Louis don't know anything about the story.
Right.
So
much less one across the river.
well, we had this
Right,
lunch.
that's a whole nother
We had this lunch,
conversation.
and another guy that was there, Rick DeRee,
Oh,
who
yeah.
I didn't know, but the DeRee Center for Entrepreneurship. I'd heard his name.
Right.
And so at this lunch, I said, "Look, I'm here. I didn't die. You can cross the bridge,
You can
right?"
cross the bridge, right, yeah.
So out of that
You don't need a
conversation,
passport.
out of that, yeah, you don't need a passport, or it's not a force field, right? So
Right.
out of that conversation came this idea that Rick has really run with and personally financed so far,
Right.
called XLRA. So XLRA,
Yeah. And it was
it's
on the cusp when we spoke a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Sure.
And it was that moment of
That
change,
was
right?
beginning it. Yeah, now it's 13 states, 70 communities. We were at South by Southwest, and everybody there said, "We've needed this forever." And the idea of Accelerate is,
Yeah.
there are serendipitous collisions, right?
Yes.
But couldn't we have strategic collisions?
Exactly.
So
Let's
the
be
whole
mindful.
right, the whole idea of XLR8,
Yes.
XLR, and then the number 8,
Yep.
.org, is you join the platform,
Right.
and you fill out what you need, what you want, what you can offer.
Yeah.
And then you're intelligently connected
Right.
to other entrepreneurs or mentors
Yeah.
or angel investors or service providers, not based on LinkedIn is who you know or
Right.
who you know knows somebody
Right.
that knows somebody
Sure.
that knows you.
Yeah.
And then you get recommended by somebody you've never talked to for something they've never seen you do.
Right.
The whole idea of Accelerate is a network that facilitates intelligently connecting entrepreneurs with the truth. So what I really need at that moment, I'm connected to people who really could help me at that moment.
An entrepreneurial resource matchmaker.
Yes, Match.com for entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
Exactly, yes.
Well, we could go on and on and on and talk about
I
such
do,
amazing.
I do, usually.
But I think that really just, again, tells the story about your involvement, our involvement, what we've seen in a short amount of time.
Right.
And how much excitement there is and how much opportunity and possibility there is
Sure.
tomorrow.
Yep.
So, again, Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you very
I know
much.
our conversation will continue.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Laura.